After coming from the West, conquering the West with all name, fame, glory, and all the adulations he got, still he remembered the gratitude, with gratitude, what the old lady did when he was an unknown, insignificant man during his wandering days. We again go back to Khetri. Today we will have three more incidents highlighting the different aspects of Swamiji's behavioral self-evaluation quality. And such behaviors become a pattern for Indians to emulate, because it is through behavior that we can see ideal working itself out on the day-to-day life and in the platform of experiential experiences. The experience itself should become an experiential thing, not lying in the pages of books. The caste problem with which whole of India is being clouded, here we get a significant lesson from the life of great Swamiji, how for a moment, though he was little swayed by that thought, he tested himself and he overcame the clouds that swayed his mind. In fact, Swamiji was not bothered because he was of a low caste man, but actually Swamiji wanted to avoid tobacco. But yet, feeling that his mind should not cheat, that because he was a low caste man, he avoided the tobacco, Swamiji went to him and had few puffs of tobacco from his hookah. One more beautiful incident we are coming across in the life of Swamiji, which we are not going to narrate, but just I will make a passing hint, that in the Khetri palace where Raja Ajit Singh had welcomed Swamiji, he had arranged for an evening entertainment when a Nautch girl was to sing and dance, and Swamiji didn't want to attend that. Being a monk, he was not interested in watching a woman dancing. But the woman, the dancing girl, thought that Swamiji didn't come because she was of a lower caste or of a lower strata of human beings in the society. And then she starts singing that famous song, Prabhu More Avguna Chitana Dharo, Samadarshi Hai Naam Tiharo. That brings a dramatic transformation in the mood of Swamiji. Hearing that word, Samadarshi Hai Naam Tiharo, Swamiji was lifted to his own great heights of Advaitic realization, where all are seen as one undifferentiated consciousness. And Swamiji, with tears in his eyes, comes down from his room, goes down to that lady, addressing her as mother. Today you have opened my eyes. Scales have fallen from my eyes. With so much humility. Humility comes only when we have knowledge. Vidya dadati vinayam. And Swamiji recognizes the greatness, the motherliness in that woman. And the life of that woman also was transformed after coming in contact with Swamiji. That is what we read from the life of Khetri Maharaja. So Khetri Maharaja was closely associated with Swamiji, and Swamiji used to say that we are both supplementary and complementary. And I had the good fortune of starting my monastic life, sannyasa life, when I joined Ramakrishna Mission Khetri in 1978. And everybody had been thinking that this fellow is leaving the house. Then I had to tell them I have left the house, but now I am lodged in the palace. So the Khetri Raja Ajit Singh and Swamiji had great close relationship with each other, and beautiful, interesting and inspiring anecdotes and incidents are there, but they are not part of our today's discussion. Today we again go back to that holy spot, Khetri, which has been sanctified by Swamiji's visit 3 times. First, before going to during his wandering days. Second time, when by his blessing Raja Ajit Singh had a son. And third time, after coming back to India, triumphantly conquering the West. So he was back from Alwar and he came to Khetri and he was staying in the palace. And before he was known to the world as Swami Vivekananda, he had come to the palace and he was staying in the palace with Raja Ajit Singh as a wandering fakir. And as he arrived at Khetri, he found there was nobody to receive him. He was sitting under a tree, and strangely people came in crowds. And it's a very unbelievable incident. People came in huge numbers. They went on talking and discussing with Swamiji so many different matters of philosophy, shastras, and on different problems of life. We will now directly listen to the words of Swamiji himself. As Swamiji says, it will be difficult to believe. He himself says, it is difficult to believe, but for 3 days and night, I did not have rest even for a minute. No food was there and I could hardly sleep, but nobody bothered about it. People went on coming and I went on talking. On the third day night, when almost all of them had gone away, a man from low caste came and told with great kindness, because he saw Swamiji talking with people and nobody is bothering to give any food or water or anything to Swamiji. He came to Swamiji and he told, Swamiji, for the last 3 days and night you have had no food or sleep and you are going on talking. My heart is deeply pained. You will definitely be feeling hungry and really tired. You have not taken even a glass of water during these 3 days. And Swamiji says, when I heard these words, my heart melted due to his love. And Swamiji asked, will you give something to eat? And the man who came to help Swamiji told, sir, my heart feels like giving something to you to eat, but I am deeply troubled. And what can I do? I belong to a lower caste, a cobbler. So I cannot prepare chapati or any food for you. I will bring atta, wheat flour and other items, and you yourself prepare the chapatis and eat. This is a peculiar situation in India in those days, that people belonging to lower caste could not give anything to anybody, because if they give, they will be punished. Swamiji told, nothing to worry, you yourself prepare and bring and I will eat. That poor man belonging to a cobbler caste started shivering. He got frightened that if this matter of his being a cobbler and having given food to a sannyasi comes to others' attention, he may be punished. Why? He may even be thrown out of the state Kshatriya also. But I assured him that I will see to it that he will not be punished. He did not believe my assurance, but due to his love for me, he brought chapatis and I also ate it with great relish. Even Indra from heaven had come and in a golden plate given this heavenly nectar. It would not have tasted as delicious as this food that was given to me prepared by the poor man from the lower caste. My heart was filled with love and gratitude, and my eyes poured tears down the cheeks. Swamiji felt sad that these people we call as untouchables and of low caste, but how highly cultured, refined, and human they are. Afterwards, this is where we have to note the behavioral expression of Swami Vivekananda, the great hero. This was a small incident of somebody feeding a hungry sannyasi. Anybody could have forgotten that incident because it's a natural custom of a Hindu to feed a sannyasi. But gratitude, thankfulness, and the extraordinary ability to repay the help that we got from others is something unique in the lives of great people. Afterwards, when Swamiji returned from the West with great success, he was welcomed by the Raja of Khetri, Ajit Singh Bahadur. Swamiji was then staying in the palace of Raja Ajit Singh Bahadur. It's called Fateh Bilas. Swamiji then got that poor man called to the darbar. The poor man came to the darbar, and seeing Swamiji and Raja Ajit Singh, he was totally shaken and frightened and started trembling, thinking that perhaps he would be severely punished for his crime, that is, being of a lower caste, he had given food to a sannyasi. But Swamiji had already narrated this incident of this poor man to Raja Ajit Singh. Raja Ajit Singh, understanding the magnanimity of that poor man, though he may be of the lower caste, praised him to the skies and gave gold and silver and other household articles in plenty. The poor man was freed from anxiety and fear, and he went away with gratitude and a wonderful smile on his face, never expecting that his insignificant act of giving food to a hungry sannyasi would come back repaid many times more. And that is the beauty of Swami Vivekananda's personality. You give him one, and he gives back you 10. That's a divine quality of great acharyas and avataras all over the world we find. And now we shall recall here one of the famous thoughts of Swamiji, where he says, "We are the servants of that God who by the ignorant is called man. I am poor and I love the poor." How true are these words of Swamiji, and how he lived those words literally and really, expressing in his life those great ideals coming down to the practical level of action, day-to-day action. This is a beautiful incident where we get so many things from so many people in our life. From our country also we get so many things, but we don't repay them. We hardly remember them. We don't even feel that we have to repay. It's a famous saying of perhaps John F. Kennedy, the president of USA, who remarked, "Ask not what the country has given to you, ask what you have given to the country." What are we giving to our parents, to the society, to the country, and to the world in which we are living is really a very, very significant question, and our life actions should answer this question. Now we move on to the second incident of today's discussion. This also is after Swami Vivekananda coming from the West. Swamiji was staying in Darjeeling Hills to recoup his health. One day Swamiji was out in the morning for a walk. Suddenly he started shouting, "Oh, the pain, oh, the pain." Two of the youngsters, perhaps his disciples, who were walking with him could not understand and asked, "Swamiji, where is the pain?" Swamiji showed his ribs and told, "Hey, did you not see that old woman with a big bundle of wood falling down on the way? And her ribs were paining as it was deeply hurt. It is her pain, the old woman's pain, which is getting reflected here in my body." Then the disciples noticed that at a distance, an old lady carrying a bundle of wood, her feet struck a stone and she fell down, hitting on a rock, and that caused intense pain. And the feeling of intense pain made her weep. Swami Vivekananda, whose heart pulsated for the entire humanity, felt the pulsation of the intense suffering of that old woman, and he also cried in pain. In fact, he literally shared her pain. And then that lady got up, took the bundle of wood, and smiling at Vivekananda, she started walking back to her house. This is really human sensitivity raised to its refined height, where just by the power of mere feeling, Swamiji could lessen the pain of others by sharing it and release the other person from that pain, and without any reason, Swamiji himself undergoing that pain. This, I think, is the infallible power of love, pure unselfish love. The so-called bhakti pales into insignificance in front of such acts of mercy, kindness, and benevolence. How heart-touching is this incident, is it not? It appeals to anybody's refined emotion. It touches a deep chord in our heart. The poor lady was a stranger, not connected with or acquainted with Swamiji. But for the saints, the so-called suffering is not my suffering or your suffering. Most of us have taken an ownership right over the suffering, and we say it is my suffering, I am suffering. But for Buddhas and Vivekanandas, it is not your suffering or my suffering, it is a suffering of humanity. Their generosity spontaneously outpours and responds wherever there is suffering, like the spring season bringing solace and comfort to people who are affected by the scorching sun, and that without any reasoning. In our case, it is our suffering that moves us to action. But in the case of magnanimous souls like Vivekananda and Buddha, suffering is nobody's private property. It is a universal existential principle. If you have really suffered in your life, if anyone has really suffered in his life, his ability would be to respond to the suffering. The response to the suffering is only the removal of suffering. And that can come when you have broken your dirty smelling shell called selfishness, me and myself. When the me and myself goes away, the suffering is human suffering. Everybody has got hunger, everybody gets headache, everybody gets heart attack. It is not your private heart attack or anybody's ownership right private heart attack. It is a human suffering, and if we are really human at our highest level, our response to suffering would be unqualified response of the ability to relieve that suffering to whatever capacity we have. Now, as we look back to some of the events and incidents that are happening in Kerala and Bangalore and other parts of India, it is really painful. Do we feel the pain of the scavengers who clean the manholes? And many times and suffer and also die, leaving their entire family in misery. Most of them do not have enough equipments, gloves or shoes or any mask to cover their nose, and yet they go inside the manhole, clean the drain, clean the septic tank, and make us live so joyfully, and yet we don't feel the misery of those people who relieve our suffering and misery. Do we feel the misery of the headload porters and other poor people working day and night so hard, and by whose sweat we all enjoy the comforts of life? This particular question Swami Vivekananda will be asking in an explosive way. In the next coming sessions, we will take it, where Swamiji, weeping for the poor people, says, who feels for them? Whoever cares for them? Whoever looks at them? Hardly we notice them, because we, small people as we are, do not have time even to attend our own selfish needs. And this is a great lesson that we Indians will have to learn from Vivekananda. The ability to respond for suffering in an unqualified way. Suffering is part of human life. You may be an American, you may be an African, you may be an Indian, to any caste, any race, any language, any religion. Suffering does not get caught into these tentacles of any race or religion or anything. It is a thing which is having no qualification. So our response also should be without any discrimination. It's with great equanimity, without any partiality, respond to the suffering. And that comes in the life of great souls. There are so many beautiful incidents which we will be taking up in the forthcoming sessions. Connected with this thought of Swami Vivekananda's incident in his life, there is a beautiful shloka composed by Adi Shankara in his Viveka Chudamani, where he describes the nature of a great soul. He says, Shanta Mahanto Nivasanti Santo Vasantavat Lokahitam Charantaha, and ends with a beautiful line, Ahetu Nanyan Apitarayantaha. These great souls, they live like a magnanimous souls, like Vasanta Ritu, like the spring season, bringing comfort and solace to all without any discrimination. And the final line, and they do all these things without any reason or logic. The only logic is that they are moved by pure, unqualified love for the suffering of the human heart. Similarly, remember the famous outpouring of Swamiji's heart in these words, where he says, and may I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries, so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls. And above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species. is a special object of my worship. These words, every time I read, it has got a thrilling effect on the mind. What beautiful sentiments Swamiji has expressed here. My God, the wicked, my God, the miserable, my God, the poor, of all races, of all species, not India alone. So he has got a sentiment pulsating in his heart for the entire globe. It's a tremendous expression of Advaita in its fullness, uncompromising love. This inner response to human being's anguish is a very blood of the central focal point of human relationships. When relationship happens really and in a concrete way, the two becomes one. So the suffering of another becomes suffering of ours. Your sorrow then becomes mine. It becomes our sorrow. Joy when shared increases, but sorrow when shared decreases. That is the greatness of sharing sorrow with others. But most of us are so caught up that we all have 24 hours picnic, and the most famous and the pet spot for picnic is our own heart, where day and night we are reveling in me and my comfort. How to release ourselves from this cage of me and my comfort? Because once we even theoretically brood over it, think over it, take it as a point in our life. Why is that I am not able to feel the sufferings of other people? Why I have become so insensitive? Why am I imprisoned in my own sorrow? Sorrow by itself has got a great divine and a medicative touch. It was this touch of sorrow that turned Prince Siddhartha into Gautama Buddha. Even in fact, in the life of Swamiji, it was this sorrow that opened the hearts of this great man, Narendra, and made him Vivekananda. Sorrow, when it is yours, it becomes contaminated. When sorrow is called as my sorrow, it is a polluted, contaminated sorrow. But when sorrow is seen as a universal human phenomenon, then that sorrow releases our mind from the cage of selfishness, and that sorrow has got a divine effect on our own mind and our own character. It releases the unqualified love from our heart. Then we respond in the most magnanimous way, like the spring season, where Shankara says, Vasantavat lokahitam charantaha. The spring season, Vasanta Ritu, does not ask who is repaying it. It doesn't expect anything from anybody for the wonderful festival atmosphere it ushers in the life of the whole country. So this is a beautiful lesson we have to learn from Swami Vivekananda. We will now turn to the third incident of today's session. This is still more thrilling, and it all makes us wonder how this great personality lived his life. Even if we are able to imitate to great extent 1/4 of that, many of the sufferings of our countrymen can be relieved. But most of us are deaf and blind, so even after seeing we are not able to see, even after hearing we are not able to hear. Now here is a beautiful incident from the life of Swami Vivekananda, how hearing awakens the inner faculties of Swami Vivekananda to respond to human sufferings. After his return from the second visit to West, one day Swamiji was in the train traveling in some part of Bengal. Along with Swamiji, there were some more monks and a brahmachari. And you know, in those days, I have traveled in those days, the way the Indian trains were, and the railway platform was so dirty, with so much of hustle, bustle, crowd, noise, and all confusions will be there. People will be bathing, somebody will be brushing his teeth, and somebody may be even passing urine and other things. And Indians by nature have a way of talking loudly. We have a way of talking very, very loudly. And all the people in the train, they were all engaged. Some children crying and some ladies talking with each other, and all of them, some of them sleeping, and all were engaged conversing with others. Even Swamiji and other monks in the compartment, they were also talking of something interesting. But suddenly the ears of Swami Vivekananda stood sharp. He asked the brahmachari in front of him the noise mentioned by Swamiji. Swamiji became annoyed and asked, "Arey, did you not hear that poor man selling horse grams? Lamenting that the whole day has gone and so far nobody has purchased anything, and that there are many members in his house. How is he going to feed those people in the house? Go, run, purchase some salted soaked horse grains from him." Brahmachari ran, approached the person, purchased some salted soaked horse grams and came back and gave it to Swamiji joyfully. Swamiji again asked, "Hey Brahmachari, for how much did you purchase?" The Brahmachari told, "Maybe some 5 or 10 paise." Swamiji became angry. He felt deeply pained and shouted at the Brahmachari, "Oh my God, only 10 paise? Fool! How can that man feed his whole family, wife, children, and other people with such a small amount? Go immediately and get the same soaked salted horse grams for 1 rupee." Only when the Brahmachari came back purchasing the horse grams for 1 rupee did Swamiji felt that he was at ease and relaxed, and he started eating the salted soaked horse grams. This is what we call in Kerala as the kadala, which is very famous in north and other places, and we call in Tamil Nadu as sundal. Look at the marvelous touch of the heart. So many things were happening in the platform, so much of noise and shouting was going on, yet Vivekananda's sensitive ears picked up that lonely voice among the millions of other noises, which was expressing its sorrow and misery. This is the extraordinary heart of Vivekananda, who tells that whenever your heart and intellect are in conflict, always follow the heart. Most of us boast of our intellect, which is dry and rather unproductive, and we have almost closed the heart. We Indians need this heart transplantation operation of Swami Vivekananda. Presently, our country abounds in intellectuals, but most of the time these intellectuals, they discuss, they have a lot of seminars, they have a lot of debates, but they all stop short of acting on what the intellect says. Intellect may say, "Oh, the poor people are suffering, they should be helped, they should be relieved from all this misery," but it ends there with that thought or emotion. Most of us are caught in the comfort zone of our own selfishness. It is the heart that acts as a propelling force. The propelling force for the intellect to work out its ideas comes from the heart. It is the heart that gives the forward motion, the kinetic energy for the intellect. It is when you feel the pain, when a poor Indian suffers, that you will start acting. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was thrown out of the compartment. He felt the pain. It was this pain that motivated him to work for reducing the pain of all black people. This feeling is the role of the heart. Without heart, intellect becomes dry. Of course, without the heart being backed by the intellect, it may become an unruly emotional flow. So there must be a combination of heart and the head or the intellect. But without heart, intellect may talk, but it will not walk, it will not work. And that is what is happening in India. Feeling, which is the fuel for activating the intellect, has heart as its center. It was the heart that made Vivekananda go to the West to find a solution for the miseries of India. Sitting on the last bit of that rock in the southern India, Kanyakumari, Vivekananda says, I hit upon a plan. And what was the plan? How to rejuvenate India and release Indians from the miseries and sufferings. There is a beautiful book by Rashmi Bansal titled I Have a Dream, where this beautiful concept of Swami Vivekananda's heart and intellect has been taken up by that lady. She seems to be devoted to Vivekananda because her daughter's name is Nivedita, and Rashmi Bansal has dedicated this book to her daughter, whose name was Nivedita. There she is taking some of the young Indians in India belonging to the middle class society. They are all coming up and working out the ideas. And to work out the ideas, what we require is not only the ideas, but the heart, the center of the feeling to propel us, force, motivate us into action, doing something for them. So she calls them a social entrepreneur, and where she mentions that in India there are lots of intellectuals who discuss, they even arrive at a conclusion, but most of them don't work out the conclusion or the solution because the motivating factor, the fueling engine, the fuel from the heart called feeling is not there. So Swami Vivekananda is a great advocate of this feeling for the people, and heart is a seat of that feeling. Today, we pray to Swami Vivekananda. Let Vivekananda sit on the lotus of our heart and awaken our heart so that we start feeling for ourselves as well as for our great India and for Indian. This is the way to unlock. This is the key to open the door for India's progress and development. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Namaskaram to all of you. This is one particular shade of Swamiji's personality I have taken. In the next one or two sessions, we will be seeing Swami Vivekananda's response towards women, not only of India, but of other countries. Swami Vivekananda was an advocate, a great advocate and a champion of women's freedom. And he was a great worshipper of women as mother and goddess. There are beautiful, sublime and profound ideas of Swamiji on Hindu philosophy and how an Indian, a true Hindu, looks upon a woman and how should we respond and get related to women of our society. Few incidents where Swamiji's relationship and his response to women are depicted, we will be discussing in the next session.